He wasn't just holding on to money, he was learning how to protect it, to make it work for him without putting himself at risk. This was just the beginning of his journey, but with every careful step, he was proving to himself that he could handle the responsibility that came with his newfound fortune. With his money secured, he knew it was time to take the next step, turning his wealth into something real, something that could provide long-term stability. He couldn't just let the cash sit around. He needed to invest in assets that would hold value and ensure his future remained secure. The system provided him with valuable insights, guiding him toward practical investments that wouldn't attract attention. Property was the safest bet. Instead of looking at luxurious apartments, he focused on small, affordable spaces in growing neighborhoods. Places that didn't stand out but had potential to increase in value over time. After weeks of searching, he found a modest apartment in a quiet part of the city. It wasn't flashy, but it was comfortable and, most importantly, a smart investment. Buying it under a trusted name rather than his own was a necessary precaution. He made sure all the paperwork was in order, avoiding anything that could raise suspicions. Stepping into his new apartment for the first time, he felt a sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was proof that he was moving forward. No longer trapped in his rundown place, he had something of his own, something that gave him a foundation for the future. But property wasn't the only thing he needed. Having his own vehicle was the next logical step. For years, he had relied on public transportation, blending into the crowd, but now he wanted independence, without drawing attention. Instead of buying an expensive, flashy car, he opted for something practical and reliable, a used but well-maintained vehicle that wouldn't raise any eyebrows. Driving it for the first time, he felt a newfound freedom. No more waiting at bus stops, no more dealing with crowded spaces. He could go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted. But even with this new sense of independence, he remained cautious. He followed the same routines, drove carefully, and made sure not to attract unwanted attention. Every purchase he made was calculated and intentional. He wasn't just spending money, he was building a future. The apartment, the car, these weren't luxuries. They were tools to help him transition into a better life without arousing suspicion. Despite his careful planning, he knew he had to stay alert. Any sudden changes in his lifestyle could make people curious, and curiosity was something he couldn't afford. He continued dressing the same, speaking the same way, and keeping his daily life as normal as possible. As he parked his car outside his new apartment one evening, he looked at how far he had come. The struggles of the past weren't forgotten, but they no longer defined him. Now he had something to hold on to, something to build upon. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that his future was truly in his hands. Despite his careful planning and smart investments, he knew that one wrong move could bring everything crashing down. People noticed changes, and the last thing he wanted was to attract unnecessary attention. No matter how much his life was improving, he had to make sure it all looked natural, like nothing had changed at all. At work, he continued showing up every day, acting as if he still needed the job just to survive. When his coworkers asked why he wasn't complaining about long hours anymore, he simply smiled and said, "You get used to it." He avoided unnecessary conversations about money, always pretending to struggle like before. At school, he kept his appearance simple. No expensive clothes, no flashy gadgets, just the same old routine. Even though he could easily afford a better lifestyle, he knew that sudden changes would make people suspicious. He walked the same paths, ate the same food, and stayed in the same social circle, never letting anyone see the real progress he had made. When neighbors asked about his new apartment, he had a simple story ready. "A relative helped me out," he would say with a humble smile, making it sound like a temporary arrangement rather than an upgrade. It was believable enough to keep them from asking further questions. The car, too, was something he had to be cautious about. Instead of driving it every day, he only used it when necessary, making sure it seemed like a practical purchase rather than a luxury. If anyone questioned him, he would laugh it off, saying, "Got a good deal, couldn't pass it up." Keeping things low-key was his top priority. Social media was another challenge. He avoided posting anything that hinted at his improved situation. No pictures of his new place, no updates about his recent purchases. He kept his profile just as empty and uninteresting as before, blending into the background like he always had. Even his spending habits were carefully controlled. He still shopped at the same local stores, buying only what he needed and nothing more. If he wanted something expensive, he purchased it discreetly, never all at once. He made sure his life appeared as ordinary as possible. But despite his careful approach, there were moments when people got suspicious. A few classmates commented on how he seemed different lately, more confident, more focused. He would just shrug and say, just trying to stay positive. He made sure to never give them a reason to dig deeper. Through it all, he reminded himself that patience was key. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He had a plan, and it was working. As long as he stayed cautious, no one would ever know the truth behind his sudden success. Sitting in his apartment one evening, he reflected on how much effort it took to keep everything under control. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. If he wanted to keep his new life, he had to stay one step ahead. And for now, that meant staying in the shadows, hidden, unnoticed, and safe. Late at night, as he sat alone in his apartment, a familiar feeling crept in. No matter how much progress he made, a small voice in the back of his mind kept asking the same question. What if it all goes wrong? He had come so far, but deep down, he knew success could disappear just as quickly as it came. What if someone found out about the money? What if he made a wrong investment? What if everything he was building came crashing down? The fear of losing everything he had worked for weighed heavily on him, making it hard to focus. Every decision felt risky. He questioned himself constantly. Was he moving too fast? Was he being too cautious? No matter how carefully he planned, the fear of the unknown lingered. He knew that one mistake could ruin everything, and that thought kept him up at night. The pressure was overwhelming. He had spent years struggling to survive, and now that he finally had a chance to change his life, he was terrified of failing. He wasn't just afraid of losing money, he was afraid of going back to the life he had fought so hard to escape. He found himself overthinking even the smallest things. Should he invest more or hold back? Should he trust the system completely or rely on his instincts? The uncertainty made him question if he was truly capable of handling success. Despite his fears, he reminded himself why he started this journey in the first place. He wanted a better life, a future where he didn't have to struggle anymore. But with that future came responsibility. Responsibility to make smart choices and avoid reckless mistakes. He knew that fear could either push him forward or hold him back. Sitting in the quiet of his apartment, he made a decision. He couldn't let doubt control him. Instead of focusing on what could go wrong, he chose to focus on what he could control, planning, learning, and taking things one step at a time. With a deep breath, he reminded himself that doubt was a part of growth. It was normal to be afraid, but fear wouldn't define him. He had come too far to let it stop him now. Looking at his phone screen, he reviewed his plans once again. Every risk had been calculated, every step thought through. He had a system to guide him and the determination to succeed. Slowly, the weight of fear began to ease. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was fighting for the future he had always dreamed of. And with that thought, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Managing his new life felt like walking on a tightrope. On the surface, nothing had changed, but inside, everything was different. Balancing his old routine with his secret wealth was harder than he expected. Every day he had to remind himself to stay cautious, to blend in, and to avoid drawing attention. At work, he continued doing his tasks quietly, never showing signs that he no longer needed the job. When his boss scolded him for small mistakes, he swallowed his pride and apologized, just like before. He resisted the urge to quit, knowing that suddenly leaving would only make people suspicious. Instead, he carefully maintained the illusion of being the same struggling employee they had always known.